What's up, guys? I'm Matt and welcome back to the Try Time podcast, and today we're going through another one of our 1 to 17 all-time Super League teams. If you've not checked out any of the previous ones, we've done Wigan, Warrington, Leeds Saints, and we're now moving over to East Yorkshire and Hull. Specifically starting with KR and FC will be following next. Obviously, before we get into the video, as you may have seen if you've watched any of the stuff on the channel lately, we are currently doing a mini giveaway thing for when we get to 1,000 subscribers. If we get there, we'll be drawing one lucky sub at random who will be winning a rugby league shirt for the 2025 season for a team of their choice. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and who knows, you might be the one that gets lucky. Now, without further ado, let's get into the Hull KR team. And Hull KR are an interesting team to choose. They're obviously a team that are very up and coming in terms of how recently they've found themselves lurking around the top of the table. And of course, they're a team that even as recently as, 2016 perhaps? Maybe, around then, spent time in the Championship. And of course, throughout the early 2000s, they did spend a lot of time down in the second tier as well. So there's perhaps a smaller player pool here, but equally, there's going to be a lot of early days legends that perhaps will have a great relationship with the Robins fans that haven't made the grade in this particular video. So let us know your thoughts, Robins fans, and otherwise what you think. And without further ado, let's jump straight into it. And at fullback, I've gone for Sean Briscoe, a man who joined Hull KR in 2008 after over 100 appearances at the Cross City rivals. He would go on to, ironically, also make 100 appearances for Hull KR. Whilst the points output was less than what he spent at FC, there was a lot of injury up and downs, but ultimately, Briscoe was probably one of the most solid fullbacks in that era of Super League. You know, he went on to stay at KR for a number of seasons and would ultimately go on to continue his career in Super League for Widnes for a couple of years when they came up into Super League in 2012, which again showed that he was more than good enough to hang at that level. This was a tough one because obviously Hull KR have had some tremendous fullbacks over recent years. Particularly look at the likes of Lachlan Coote, for example, who was a very steady and key part of Hull KR's progression from a solid mid-table team to a team that's pushing for the top four and Wembley and potentially even winning the minor premiership this year. And whilst he seems the obvious shooting, I've gone for Briscoe just because he's got that bit more longevity at the club. He was around, of course, when KR were relatively new back into Super League, so it's hard to compare achievements for achievements. 30 tries in 100 games, solid return for the fullback, and stabilised Hull KR as a Super League regular. On the wing, I'm going to go for another one from that similar era. In fact, I think almost the exact same seasons of 2008 through to 2011, and that is Peter Fox, who had more than a try every other game at his time at Hull KR, scoring 61 across 110 games. It was, in fact, at Hull KR that he made his England debut and in fact got all 6 of his appearances for England, where again he maintained his over a try a game record with 7 tries in 6 games. The Rhinos Academy product debuted for Hull KR at Headingley against Leeds and opened his KR scoring streak in France against Catalan, and that was just one of memorable moments for Fox. With electric pace, he was difficult to stop in broken play, and KR used that to their advantage. And you know, that era of KR, I think, was signified by the likes of Cockayne and Peter Fox on the wings, who just were solid, quick wingers, who, of course, teamed up again at Wakefield. But, yeah, after much discussion and deliberation, it was Peter Fox who got the first wing spot. And with that, we will move into the centres. And this is probably the name who surprises you the least here. And it is, of course, a player who is very fondly known on this channel. It is Chris Wellham. And it had to be Chris Wellham, didn't it, really? A product of the KR Academy, debuting in the Championship, staying with the club for an entire decade before leaving to join Bradford. it was a case of 102 tries in 191 appearances for Wellham, and form that, as we know from previous videos, put him in my Super League team of the decade. I think that's testament to what he achieved. It's a difficult one to mark because obviously this was again the time when KR were really stabilising, but they were a Super League club throughout this. He made his England Knights appearance whilst at KR. He was probably one of the most solid and dependable centres in the league throughout that time and really shone at KR, and things he's gone on to do in terms of cementing his reputation post then is, again, testament to his ability and what's got him in this squad, because let's face it, there's a lot of competition, as we know, especially from the recent years. Moving on to the next centre, and joining him is SKD, Sean Kenny Dowell. The NRL legend who, of course, played in the grand final many a time for Sydney Roosters and won plenty of silverware there, ended his career at Hull KR after joining in 2020. He made 93 appearances for the Robins, 25 tries, and is widely considered to be probably one of the most talented players to ever don the Hull KR jersey. And to be honest, I think that's fair. He came over with a lot of people thinking, is this just going to be another elder statesman Aussie coming for a final payday before he hangs up his boots? And he proved every single one of his doubters wrong. Ultimately, Kenny Dowell was there as KR improved, finishing bottom of the table in 2020, albeit with the pandemic and the whole Toronto fiasco. That was kind of a nothing season. It was really in 21 when KR started to come on strong. A dream team appearance in 22, including 23 appearances across KR, a mainstay in their season, every game in 21. And he obviously was a key part of them getting to Wembley last year. So it's a shoo-in. Sean Kenny Dowell is into the team. Joining him on the other wing, then, we're going right back to, I guess, Hull KR folklore. And despite only making 45 appearances for them, this is a man who really cemented himself with a legacy at Hull KR. And he is, of course, the Hull-born David Hodgson. It seems quite crazy when people think about Hodgson's career that he actually spent so little time at KR, especially considering how highly he's rated by their fans. And of course, he's still part of the setup, I believe, at KR in some way, shape and form. Hodgson, his first stint was good. He came out of retirement again in 2017 to help the Rovers and take his Super League points haul up to 100. And again, this was a tough one. There were lots of people I could have looked at in terms of this position. I had the likes of Josh Mantellato in mind, whose goal kicking was a key part of KR edging close games and their first Wembley appearance of the modern era in 2015. And of course, more so infamous for the try-time trivia moment, if you know, you know. But yeah, in the end I had to go for Hodgson just because as a man it's clear his love for KR is there and the KR fans really, really respect him back, and yeah, he's got to go in. Moving into the halfbacks then, and rattle through these ones because these are probably some of the easiest decisions in there. And, you know, people will say, oh, what about Albert Kelly? For me, he doesn't do enough to get there, not when you think he's up against, at number 6, Mikey Lewis. Whilst Lewis wears 7 on his back, this is, I believe, largely due to KR retiring the number 6 shirt and that not being available. In reality, Lewis's game is much more like a traditional 6, and that's where I'm going to play him here. At just 23, the sky is the limit for this kid, and he has that raw talent combined with an ability to really get under an opponent's skin. And, you know, we saw the other week against Catalan and the whole incident with Cesar Rouge. That's not necessarily always to the benefit of his game, but more often than not, he channels it in a way that allows him to be the best player he can be. So, as he closed in on 100 appearances for KR, and mad to think he played 7 times for Newcastle and 4 for York in his career, the England international is a shoo-in at 6. And his half-back partner is another somewhat of a Hull KR legend who came over to the club in 2008, right at the tail of the season, and 153 appearances later left a true legend at the Robins. I am, of course, talking about Michael Dobson. An all-Michael halfback, it turns out. Dobson took Hull KR to 4th in just their 3rd Super League season in 2009, where he won the 2nd ever Albert Goldthorpe medal, which I don't think exists anymore, but it is awarded by the Rugby League and League Express to honour the leading player in this Super League, which it turns out does still exist, actually. Bevan French and George Williams won it last year. So there you go. You learn something new on this podcast every day. Dobson was a mainstay in Hull KR's team throughout the early years, and I think it's fair to say that when he departed to go back to Australia and try his hand at Newcastle, no KR fan begrudged him that opportunity to go back home and try and reinvent himself in the NRL. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. He got into the New South Wales Cup Team of the Year, but never really was able to make that step up back into first grade. Appeared 6 times, wasn't consistently in there. I think he realised he missed playing week in, week out. He came back over to Salford, 80 appearances there before retirement. And actually, it was almost fitting because, bar a brief stint for 2 years at Canberra, Dobson has spent most of his career playing Super League, be it for Catalans and Wigan in the early days, and then obviously the big stint at KR. And yeah, I think the KR fans would be mad and angry with me if he didn't feature in this team. Going into the forwards now, we've got the Tongan international Mickey Payer, who played for Hull KR in 2012-13, and again, not a player who made massive numbers of appearances, only appearing 54 times for the Robins before he switched across the town to go play for Hull FC, where, ironically, maybe he had even more of an impact. Despite this, Payer was undoubtedly one of the best players in that era for Hull KR. He was a solid second rower that never took a step back, and okay, while he might have never got the glamorous lifestyle, maybe even sometimes the plaudits of Lupini's era at Catalans, there was no doubt that Mickey had more than enough talent to match his older brother. Just 6 tries, but then that's not really what his job was to do as a prop. He never took a backward step and was somewhat adored by the KR fans. Of course, getting into the Tonga team whilst at Hull KR, I guess the main fallout there would have just been, like we say, that 2-year switch to go join FC and his return there again in 2017. But on the pitch ability, Payer starts. Hooker is, again, I think probably one of the easier ones on this. He, Hull-born, however, came through the academy at Hull FC. But due to limited appearances, he decided to go chase the first team football and signed in 2010 for Hull KR, staying 5 years before joining Canberra is, of course, Josh Hodgson. The England international probably scored one of Super League's most cheeky tries when walking back to the 10 metres to tap the penalty, or so they thought. A quick blind turnaround saw him scoot over the line. And that was just a start of what Hodgson could do at Hull KR. He took Super League by storm, made it in the NRL, was England's starting hooker for years, which, considering James Roby existed, is a tremendous achievement. And despite 3 career-threatening ACL injuries, he got back on the saddle one more time to do his final season at Parramatta. It was unfortunately a neck injury there that forced him into early retirement, because at 34, you do think without that he could have still been going. Maybe he would have been the guy rather than McAlorum, who would take that elder statesman, that experienced hooker spot at KR. That's a case of what if. What we do know is Hodgson left his KR legacy on a high and will probably be the best hooker of the Super League era to play for Hull Kingston. In the second prop phase, we're going back to early days Hull KR now, and someone who spent over a decade there. Despite being released, he came back again, and in 2 separate stints, Jason Netherton picked up just shy of 200 appearances for the Robins. I don't need much more to say about this. The Hull KR fans absolutely adore this man's loyalty. He is, of course, Hull-born, Hull-bred, and despite making it through the Leeds Academy, it wasn't too long, really, before he found his way back home. Only 3 times he appeared for Leeds. Loan stints at London and Halifax followed, but he followed his heart, returned to Hull KR in 2004 and stayed there until retirement in 2014. A true, I guess, KR, one of their own stories, even though academy-wise he wasn't there. And joining him in the second row is another Hull-born second row. This one, FC Academy through and through, and he would play there 128 times in a 7-year stint. His brother, in fact, staying at FC for even longer. His whole career, in fact. I am, of course, talking about Graham Horn. 87 times a KR player, 17 tries, playing across the second row and centre, and the former England international, I think, just did it all at Hull KR, really. Not in terms of success, but in terms of building that foundation as a solid squad player. And that's kind of what he's in to do here. A dependable forward who we can throw on, rotating around the pack, and will deliver a solid job. This was ultimately his last Super League gig before going on to York and retiring at Doncaster. But like I say, it was those transitional years where KR had established themselves in Super League, maybe didn't quite have the full identity yet. Things started to fall off a little as they headed down, stabilise, come back up. Horn was at the centre of it all and was one of the solid, dependable 8 out of 10 players every week, and it perhaps comes as no surprise that that is enough to get him in. Joining him in the second row is Ben Galea, the Australian New South Wales representative. 126 appearances, 36 tries. Again, another one who would go on to Hull FC following his time at KR. But again, it was Super League. It was Hull KR where he is really remembered for his time in Super League. And again, he was kind of stunk the joint up a little bit more at FC. Certainly compared to his KR stint, albeit he didn't do bad there. Yeah, Galea was straight in. And I guess just to finish off this starting lineup then, it is the loose forward and Papua New Guinea's finest, Stanley Jean. Yes, a man that, of course, spent a lot of time at Bradford, which I'm sure Callum will be delighted to hear me say. There's certainly a real story in this player. It was many controversies with this man, largely around his age, and it feels very much the typical conversation we have about a number of footballers. Many people thinking that he was very much older than his 1974 registration date. He couldn't provide a birth certificate, apparently. Many people thinking in 2008 he could be as old as 45. However, it was a load of rubbish. We eventually got the end of the story in 2013. He found his birth certificate. It was 1974. Cool off-the-pitch stories aside, Jean, or Janae as I believe it should actually be pronounced, is nothing short of a legend at Hull KR. Brought over to the UK for his versatility, allowing him to play almost anywhere, including in the halves, frankly. He featured for KR for 96 all the way through to 2000s, the Super League era's very beginning, even if KR weren't necessarily a part of it for all that time. 94 tries later, he would go on to spend time at Hull FC, as everyone seems to do, Huddersfield, Bradford, before returning to Hull KR in the late 2000s, where he'd pitched up for another 55 appearances and had 10 more tries to his collection. Janae is considered a hero in his home place, Papua New Guinea. For 16 times he represented the Cumals, and he's probably as much royalty in Hull as he is over there. Stanley Janae is in undoubtedly at 13. I'm going to quickly rattle off the bench. I'm conscious we're 20 minutes deep into this one now, and there's a few players who were unlucky to miss out there, notably Elliot Minchella at 13. The guys that have made the bench: Matt Parcell. Coming in 2019 and swap for Sean Lunt, it was probably one of the best upgrades at the time that Hull KR could have made. The grand final winger will be confirmed to be leaving the club at the end of this season, but he will leave with his head held high. 111 appearances to date and the chance to really wrap his time at KR up with some silverware. For Parcell's sake, fingers crossed he can do it, because obviously as a Leeds fan, I've got tremendous memories of him. And yeah, a great player who I'm really glad found a second home. Joining him on the bench, another big forward here in Clint Newton, the US-born, NRL legend, I assume. Well, I say. I'm not quite sure legends, maybe the moniker, but I think it's certainly close. Made it at Newcastle and Melbourne, came over to Hull you can tell I've been talking too long. Came over to Hull KR for a century of appearances. 3 seasons later, went and had another crack in the NRL and smashed it a second time at Penrith before retiring where it all began at Newcastle. Newton is certainly very well loved at Hull KR. He was somebody, again, who came over, a bit like Kenny Dowell, not sure what to expect. Big name Aussie coming through. And he only went and smashed every expectation the KR fans had of him. He featured in the Dream Team in 2009 alongside Bengalaire and Michael Dobson and Sean Briscoe, who of course we mentioned earlier, and signed the contract through to the end of 2013 to stay at Hull KR. Albeit he wouldn't quite see out that whole time before departing. He did leave at the end of 2010 to sign for 2011 even to sign for Penrith ahead of the 2012 campaign. The US-born, US international, very rogue one there, but undoubtedly deserves his spot in the KR team. Our next back on the bench, in fact our only back on the bench, is a man who was also featured in the Leeds version of this video, so check that if you haven't already, and it is Ryan Hall. Ryan's impact at KR showed that they could pull the big names in, with many expecting him to return to Leeds when the time in the NRL expired. However, he didn't. He went and delivered consistent performances week in, week out for Hull KR, and of course, whilst at the club, broke the record for the most tries scored in Super League, and for that alone, I think he's worthy of a mention. There are definitely other people that we discussed earlier, Mantelato, for example. But, you know, there's moments that people will remember. And when people look at the list of try scorers in Super League, they're going to look to the ones that set the bar. For Maguire, it's the many against Bradford. For Ryan, you're going to look at the try that broke it, and that's going to be Ryan Hall in a Hull KR shirt. And that is something that they will never be able to take away. And to finish this one off then, the final player on this team is Michael Vella, another Australian, another Michael in fact, who spent 5 years in Hull KR colours between 2007 and 2011. The former Dally M Rookie of the Year retired at the club after 121 appearances and 14 tries. It was in fact a shock that in 2005, while still at Parramatta, before even signing for Hull KR, he fought and beat thyroid cancer to continue his career in the NRL and then ultimately in Super League. A current brand ambassador for the Parramatta Eels and hometown club Cherrybrook trainer, I think we wish Vella's continue in good health more than anything else, and just generally a fantastic player, a great role model and a great captain who saw KR through those early turbulent years and, of course, to that impressive 4th place finish in 2009. That's our list at least. There's certainly a few names that we could have mentioned and that didn't, but we've already gone on for a long, long time on this one. Let me know who you would have picked, who I missed, who should I have included, who maybe doesn't deserve it, and with Hull FC on the horizon and how many of those players made that move, is there anyone who will appear in both Hull videos? The only way to find out is to subscribe. You might even win a shirt, and check out next time. Until then, I'm going to stop waffling. Thank you for listening and sticking it this long. Goodbye.